Welcome everyone to the second annual Black Dad Challenge presented by pocstock. Wanted to thank everybody for coming and learning more about how we're thinking about redefining what Black fatherhood is, and especially what it means to us. If you think about all of the information that's out there about what Black fathers are, a lot of it is not positive. And pocstock, our entire mission and ethos is around creating positive imagery and images of people of color. So we wanted to make sure we address something that's in the marketplace. And it's especially personal to me as a Black father, father of five. And, hearing all of the things that people say about Black dads, there are stereotypes out there. And if you think about, some stereotypes are always true, but by and large, I know a lot of amazing dads. And we have three of those amazing dads here today to kind of share their story. And I wanted to make sure that everyone knows that, one, we are not unique. We're not special. There are millions of us out there who handle our business, take care of our kids, are nurturing, emotional, caring. And we just wanted to give you a few examples and allow everyone to tell their story so you walk away with that image in your head. We will have a Q&A section at the end. So during the entire program, you can post your comments in the chat and we'll make sure we get to them at the end. Make sure to use the hashtag Black Dad Challenge throughout the weekend. It is Father's Day weekend. So as you celebrate the dads in your life, make sure to add them to our campaign by hashtagging them Black Dad Challenge. So one of the people I want to introduce you to is Emmanuel Fordjour. He is the VP of Finance at the Beanstalk Group. He's a newly minted dad. Welcome to the Fathers Club. Would love to hear your story. Next is Mr. Ron Skeete, fellow Bajan and Brooklynite. He's the director of the Salvation Army Pathway of Hope. And last but certainly not least, is a good brother currently residing out in Canada. His name is Rick, we call him Rick, but Rick Lajoie. He's the VP of Global Product Creation at Footlocker. I wanted to make sure I got your title right, Rick, because you've been leveling up over the years and can't keep track of all your titles. So I just wanted to make sure we bring everyone in the conversation. Manny, I want to start with you as the newest member of the Fathers Club. Wanted to make sure you give us a quick snapshot of what fatherhood means to you. Because it means something different to each one of us, and having that kid, having that child, that person to care for who's relying on you, it means something to each one of us. So if you could start by letting us know what being a father means to you.
Sure. Pleasure to join this panel. Fatherhood is very important to me, and it really stems from myself having really good father and really good role model in my dad. It means continuing that legacy, that the knowledge that you can transfer over to your child is so important. It's not just knowledge, but it's how to treat people. It's character traits. All of these things are very important. Not obviously for mothers also, but definitely
Sure.
fathers to really impart on their kids, their offspring. And I think for me, it really is the ability to transfer my knowledge, my learnings, throughout my life, the things I've learned from my parents and grandparents and so forth, and continuing that knowledge transfer and nurture.
No, absolutely. And I think each of us will have a similar story in terms of, and we'll get into your relationship with your dad a little bit later. Ron, from, you're a father of two teens. So you're a veteran like me. So, if you want to give a quick snapshot of your family, your kids, and how has being a father shaped your life personally and professionally?
Hopefully you can hear me well.
Absolutely.
It's phenomenal, and it's scary. It's terrifying. Kind of like, you hear the roller coaster ride all the time that people related to. My wife and I have two teenagers, as you mentioned, and it's a crazy ride, but I wouldn't give it up for the world. It's a great, we're here to do something on this earth. And I believe, when you have the opportunity or you're blessed to be around young people or have children of your own, particularly as a father, you're really thinking about legacy building and what lessons that, as Emmanuel said, you can pass on that's going to help build the future.
No, absolutely. And building positive legacy is important. And also in certain cases, depending on how you grew up, you want to stop certain cycles as well. So in terms of that, Rick, I know that you are a career man and you've ascended to some really great heights and accomplished some great things. In the mix of all of that, you and your wife were blessed with a daughter. So let me know and let the audience know how has having a daughter impacted you in a positive way? Like, what does it mean in terms of being a father of this young daughter?
Yeah, Steve, thank you. For you, Pocstock, for having me. I wanted to start with that first and foremost, and then obviously recognize the other dads on this call. I think we all know how difficult this journey is by all means. So happy Father's Day to you guys, and kind of fortunate to have this opportunity, kind of be on this panel with you guys. But for me, it centers around a bunch of things, man. It's a mix of so many components to it, right? You never really know until you're in it. And I kind of summarize it in some ways of there's sacrifice, there's selflessness, right? That comes into it. And how do you challenge yourself out of that? And obviously, it's human nature to constantly think about yourself in a lot of ways, but now you have to, kind of be able to pass on a lot of what you've learned, what you've gained over the years to someone else, right? From that perspective. And then the reality of it, I think it's a privilege and a blessing, man. It's one of the most amazing things I've ever experienced, obviously, in my life. And especially, I think, and I don't know what having a boy would be like, but man, having a girl just in being a man and it opens your eyes in so many different ways from that perspective. So, there's mixed emotions to it. Like everyone says, it's a roller coaster ride, but there's so much that comes from it in terms of growth and what you get out of it.
Yeah, no, they definitely having girls. I have 3 boys and 2 girls, and having girls definitely changes everything. It changes the game. I'm definitely a girl dad. I'm 6'5", and my girls have me wrapped around their little pinky, as people would say. But in terms of this year, I just want to do a quick mental health check. You mentioned, the difficulties in us getting together and being there for our kids. And normally our kids may be out doing activities and being in person. And, I know you guys have newborns, but how has being home for the past year, affected you guys in your relationship with your kids? And as on the other end of the coin, as things starting to open up, how do you anticipate that's going to change? And this can go to whoever wants to answer it.
Sure, I'll take a first stab at it. I'm the father of a newborn, and so all he's known is daddy at home for COVID. We work from home, and so every morning I get to wake up with him and greet him as he wakes up every morning. I'm with him all the time during the day, in the evenings, and so he's gotten really used to me being around, and I've gotten used to him, just seeing him. Really, it's amazing. You keep hearing about the rapid changes that kids go through as infants, and I'm seeing it literally day by day, week by week, and I've had the opportunity being able to work from home to see that and really experience that.
And do you dread going, now that things are open back up, do you dread going back into the office, or is that like? It's necessary. I've been very efficient working from home, but I do understand that from where we were going to the office 5 days a week, nonstop, early, late, versus where I think envision us going a more modified schedule. I think it's a median that we'll have to get adjusted to. And Rick, when you had your daughter, you and your wife had your daughter, you were a stay-at-home dad for a little bit. Tell us about that.
Yeah. No, it was, it wasn't one that we planned by any means at the time. At a point in my career, I'd hit, real, unique opportunity to work for an amazing organization and took a role at Gap Inc., heading up their global merchandising team, and spent 2 years there. And then just, things didn't work out, right? And it was a bad cultural fit. And it led to, kind of just me then being at home for a year. That I took some time, and some of it was, kind of to obviously, take care of what we had going on. But some of it was obviously as I was trying to figure out what the next stage of my career and my life would be. And the reality of it is it hit home in so many ways, man. Like, I work in an industry that you don't, it's not a 9 to 5, right? It's, you're working 15-hour days, you're traveling a lot. And I don't know if I'd be the same father if that experience didn't happen. So I think it was meant to be. And I think God definitely played a role in what that and how that played out in my life from that perspective, to kind of say, just stop and focus on this for a moment. And it gave so much perspective and and kind of just, the way I think go about my life and think about my family today with my wife and my little one now from that perspective. So it was a struggle too, by any means. You get moments where you're like, all right, well, I've worked all my life. This is the first time of just kind of being at home. What is that going to mean? And, you never expected to be the stay-at-home dad and had moments from it. But man, it was just amazing. It was amazing. Got to actually, take her every day to different walks and to the library for, for different types of, reading courses and things like that from that standpoint. And it was a nice ride for sure.
Yeah, no, I've been through a similar journey, so I can definitely appreciate that. When I closed my last company, my wife and I agreed that I was burnt beyond burnt. And I intended to take 3 months off, because I haven't had a vacation in 10, 15 years, and I was really burnt. That 3 months turned into 2 years. And in that time was really the time where I got to go to all the school trips, go to the PTA meetings that, I wasn't able to attend every single one. And there's a difference between being there in a home and being present. And that allowed me to fully 100% be present for everything that I wanted to be present for. And it was invaluable.
You hit the nail on the head with the being home versus being present situation, no question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Ron, in terms of this past year, in terms of COVID, and you have 2 teenagers. And that's a whole different level of conversation, especially with the landscape of everything going on in the background since George Floyd and COVID and the political landscape. Like, how has this year kind of shaped you? And how is your mental health and your kids' mental health with absorbing all of this information coming at them? Like, it's a crazy time.
It is. We're making it, just like everybody else, trying to be resilient, hoping that, we're at the tail end of it, but it's a new normal. As you all just talked about, the difference between being around and being present, and my world is a nonprofit. I get a chance to talk to families and train folks, and you actually had a chance to kind of reset a bit, right? So where folks may have been scattered and so busy, during the pandemic, a lot of families, I think, had a chance to have different conversations, reset a bit, if they took advantage of it. And, for myself, it hit home for me hard, probably around the first week in April. Because after all the series of events, we were sitting down eating dinner, and I asked my son a little bit about the George Floyd situation and how did he feel about it. And his response was, he shrugged his shoulders and said, "I'm used to it." And that floored me. He's 13 years old. That's not the world I want him to be a part of, and that just really put a fire in me to just kind of, change how I walk in this world and what I advocate for. Because, for a 13-year-old at that point to kind of see the world from that lens, that a Black man could be killed in public by a police officer, and that's just the way it is, it's unacceptable.
It is unacceptable. And I think that is a compounded tragedy, not just a tragedy within itself that a man lost his life. He was a father. He had a family. He was part of a community. But then when we get numb to it, or it becomes so frequent that we don't even remember everyone's name,
Exactly.
I think that is the long-term tragedy there. But you said something interesting, and in the Black community, we always have the talk, and now I have 3 kids, of age. One is just starting to drive, one is driving in college, and one is off on his own. And I live in New Jersey, so New Jersey has its share of issues, but it's not the same as other parts of the country where, the cops are as rampantly out of control, but I still worry every time they leave the house. And I'm finding myself having the talk, you used to only have to have the talk once, but I'm finding myself having to talk a lot more often. Do you guys think about how you prepare your kids to go out in the world in terms of the talk? And, I know you guys have newborns, but do you get any angst about sending, as your kids go out into school and out into the world? Let me start with Ron, since he has teenage kids, but, this can be open to anyone.
Sure. I'll say it quick. I mean, using my son as an example, and my daughter's 17, so it actually goes for both of them. She just got her permit and we drive and is about to get her license. But, for my son, he's 13, so he had a growth spurt over probably right before the pandemic. So, moments that for others, right, raising their children and raising sons would be really excited about as you see your young man developing, as his voice got deeper and he got taller and he started, his shape started to look more manly. I was pleased, my wife and I, but we were also terrified because are people going to mistake him as a threat? And that was very relevant for us.
Right. Yeah, my son, TJ, who is in the background right now running this live stream, so I'm super proud of him. He is almost my height. And, when he left the house to go out on his own, I was terrified. Not because he's a bad kid. He's actually one of the sweetest young men you'll ever meet. And I mean that in the most positive way possible. Like he's sharp and everything, but when he left the house, I was just mortified that someone would not look at him and see all of who he is, just that he's tall, he's dark, and perceive him as a threat. So where do some of these, have you guys ever thought about where do some of these stereotypes that allow people to perceive us as a threat come from? Like, if you look at all the statistics about Black fathers, if you ask them, if you say, hey, I'm going to tell you a story about a Black father, 9 out of 10 times, people are not going to think, okay, this is going to be a positive, uplifting story. They're going to think it's going to be something negative. And if you look at the pure numbers, not the statistics, but the pure raw numbers, the data does not bear out that we're not present. I think that there's a conflation of being married and living in the same space as being a part of your kid's life. They conflate those two things. And in our community, there is a disparity in terms of married women, married couples and living in the same household, but that does not mean that the father is not present in the kids, in the child's life. But have you guys heard any of these stereotypes and how does it impact you?
Yep. Go ahead, man.
Yes. No, I was saying absolutely. You hear these stereotypes, and going back to your first part of your question is why is it out there? It's the media. It's media consumption that's warped and not reality. What happens is most people who have that perception actually don't have any real world relationship with Black fathers. When all of your information is coming from a source that is inaccurate, that becomes your reality. And I think that's what's caused this inaccurate perception of lack of Black fatherhood, because if you look around there, as you said, there are millions and millions of really great Black fathers out there that are helping to raise their kids.
And the stats aren't even close. Like, I mean, the stats are close, but they're not even close to what the stereotypes are. And Rick, what have you seen out there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, Manny hit it spot on. Obviously, there's immediate impact that's always going to influence stereotypes in some way. But I think the piece of it that I think I always think about is how do you get the other side to come through, right? From that perspective, and in how much work do we need to do to be able to allow, not just even our culture, but obviously other cultures to be able to see us in a different light, because it's there, right? From that perspective, you just have to be able to kind of try to figure it out, right? And try to get it through and cut to the noise that's being shown to some degree. So, that's all our roles, right? Not just even through our kids, but through our friends' kids and through whatever kind of, access we have in any way to anyone within our culture and outside of our culture to kind of say, hey, here's what it does look like, right? From that perspective, not all Black fathers are this, that, and the third in the way that it's portrayed, right, in the media from that perspective. So, whether it's TV, whatever the case may be, it's just the more that we are able to get things out there that show us in the light that I think that is there. And obviously some of it is real in terms of the negatives, but we know that the numbers, to your point, don't add up to that same degree. So they're always going to be portrayed in a different manner.
I mean, I would even say that, it exists, shameless plug, right? Because pocstock isn't a household name yet, right? Because what you're doing, Steve, and this company is phenomenal because it debunks these myths. I mean, I'm sure the brothers on the call, you look back, I don't know any deadbeat dads. When I think about all of my friends, my guys from college, family members, etc., even if they are not married and they're divorced, they are active and present in their children's lives, right? And, this whole myth that is out there that's been propagated for years, as you said and started this off, we are not unique, but the story hasn't been told and supported. And that's why it's really an honor to be here today.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's one of the reasons why pocstock exists, is to create these conversations to sort of counter program all of these negative narratives about people of color in the marketplace. And no matter how much positive has been thrown at Black father stats and Black father, Black fathers exist, we're not uniquely the only voice out there. But it just doesn't seem to go away. Even Barack Obama at some point was parroting some false stat that 70% of children are raised without a father. Black children are raised without a father, and it's just not true. Now, if you say they're not married and living in the same household, then the numbers skew a little higher. But even myself, it's to your point, Ron, I have good friends of mine that even when I was like younger in my 20s, who we didn't have a blueprint for what a good father was. They had full custody of their children. And this is in the hood where everything around you there's no blueprint for all the positives that you learn later on in life. And they have full custody of their kids. And
you're not going to see it on TV.
Yeah.
Some of that is starting to change, thankfully. But, for decades, that has not been the image. It hasn't been Leave It to Beaver for us. It's like Cosby Show and then that's it.
Yeah. No, the Cosby Show was the first time on record, I could see a Black successful man, Black successful woman, lawyer, doctor, raising kids together. And that was a mind-blowing image.
It's funny.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, no, it's funny the fact that you were saying it was quoted. It was like 50% of Black children grow up in homes with single, parents, right? From that standpoint, mainly that's the burdens on the mother, right? From that point of view related to that. But then the other fact that they don't really speak about is the percent, like the number of Black men who are home, right, from that perspective, in are part of their child's life actually at a higher rate take care of their children than most other cultures from that standpoint, in terms of like the amount of work they put in and all that, right? That never really gets talked about.
Right.
From that perspective. So there's a lot of those things that you gotta, like, again, we've got to get that information out in much more meaningful ways so people kind of understand, but those things don't.
Yeah, and I think, Rick, you have the expertise on it, right? It's not only the numbers, but it's how the messages are portrayed, right? You know,
go deeper.
I know from the nonprofit world, you know, in addition to fathers being around, but you think about coaches, right? Those are fathers as well, you know, out there. I'm a part of 100 Black Men, and, you know, we got brothers who don't even have children of their own that they're out here supporting and being in the lives of multiple other young men that use and need that support.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to parrot, Ron, your comment earlier. I don't know any deadbeat dads either amongst any of my group of friends or acquaintances. And I think one of the main reasons is it's just not socially acceptable behavior amongst us, right? I think, you know, we would call out an individual that we do if there was a child involved and they were not stepping up to the plate. And so I think the socially acceptable behavior now, I don't know what it was in prior ages, but I know now it definitely is not socially acceptable.
But I would add one thing to that, right? If we really start to look at the science and the numbers around systematic racism, right? And you look at the number of Black males that have been incarcerated, you will see a direct correlation to the missing dads. You know, that's what I would call it.
Right. That's great.
I mean, Ron, you hit it spot on. I mean, that was an intent, right? That's the Reagan era from that standpoint. So, I mean, that obviously had a major impact on the Black community in so many ways, right? The number of incarcerated Black men, we know the numbers. It's outlandish, but, you know, so that drives a lot of that.
It does drive a lot of it, and that's an important stat. You guys touched on two important stats that don't get factored into the overall picture. One, the stat where it says that we are, when we're present, you know, amongst all of the other racial groups, we are very, you know, active in reading and, you know, putting kids to bed and playing and doing, like, we're very active with those. And I don't want to paint a picture here that there aren't people out there who fit the stereotype, because that would be unfair to all of the single mothers who are raising those kids, because there are people who fit that stereotype.
But it's across all races as well.
But that is exactly my point. It's not disproportionately a Black thing. If you look at any of the data amongst other groups, there's probably one or two groups that trend much lower, but amongst White, Black, and Hispanics, the numbers are relatively in the same ballpark. If you look at percentage of the population, we're not as much of the population. So if you look at the pure numbers, there are more non-Blacks who fit that category. But I don't want to dismiss it like it's not happening, but because it is. But you know, but the whole point is, you know, what do we do from here? Because, you know, the whole point of what we're trying to do with pocstock is to try to bring these conversations to light. You know, it's going to take some time. It's going to take more of these conversations to showcase dads like yourselves and say, you know, we're out here. We do exist. So I invite everyone watching to join the Black Dad Challenge. Hashtag this weekend, Black Dad Challenge. Showcase the Black dads in your life, whether they're just people you admire or your own father figures in your life. But I did want to pivot a little bit to, you know, we talked about you guys. We talked about your children. I'd love to talk about, you know, I didn't grow up with a blueprint. My father was not present in my life, most of my life. He was there when I was young, and he kind of presented himself several times as I was growing up, but he wasn't there on a day-to-day basis. And I don't fault him for it. He wasn't a deadbeat or anything like that. It's just things worked out that way. But I didn't have a blueprint. So when I parent my kids, because I never had that parent, I'm the I love you every second kind of guy. I give my boys a kiss on the cheek. I'm that omnipresent, you know, I shower them with love, and they get tired of me saying how much I love them. But part of that is because of how I grew up without a dad. So I'm pretty much being the opposite of what I'm actually being what I wanted growing up. So how has your your experience with your own dads. Were your dads present? Did you have a good relationship? And how does that impact how you raise your own kids? Let's go with Ron.
Sure. I grew up in more of a traditional household, so my dad was there all the time. I think, well, let me just put it this way. My dad, and I think some of the fathering issues, right? Like we said, we definitely want to recognize single moms who are really doing a fantastic job on their own, right? But in my situation, I look back and think some of this is generational man stuff, if you will, and sort of like how fathering has evolved. And I think it swung back around with our generation. So for my dad, he was a set the example. He was a work hard type of dad, but he wasn't a talk to you dad. He wasn't a play catch with you dad. You know what I mean? I joke around until, recently, and my father's passed 2 years ago, but he was always there. But we didn't really have conversations. He wasn't like, I love you, right? Not until he was retired and maybe a senior citizen did I hear him telling me he loved me, and our relationship really got closer. But, growing up, I tell folks from like 0 to 18, if I put all the conversations we had together, it's probably maybe about 4 hours of conversation, because he was just, hey, I'm taking care of the bills, I'm doing my part, and that's all I got to do.
That is a generational thing, but it's also a cultural thing because we're both from Barbados, and Bajans are not notoriously affectionate. Rick, what about you? How was your relationship with your dad?
Well, it's funny listening to Ron's story, and obviously being from Haiti, so my situation is very cultural as well. I was fortunate and blessed that my dad has been there. So I grew up with a traditional family with my mom and my dad, being at home from that perspective. I think similar to how Ron explained, I think the relationship was solid, right, in that perspective, but it wasn't deep, and you can always tell like there wasn't a lot of conversations there. It wasn't a lot of I love yous and affectionate and, kind of vulnerable moments to that perspective. That just wasn't my dad. You know what I mean? He was hardcore and worked his ass off, right? Because we migrated to this country with nothing, right? From that perspective. And I so to this day owe everything to him and my mother based on obviously what they were able to kind of give myself and my sisters and my brother from that perspective. But yeah, but we've had our challenges, right? And in terms of just communication and in reality of being able to kind of have those conversations. And some of that sits in me still, and I can tell, in that standpoint, I try to break that to some degree and really assess that and be like, all right, to your point, Steve, on just like, hey, these are the things I didn't get. Like, how do I make sure that I'm not, that I'm kind of representing that and doing that right to my child in some ways. And I think a lot of it has to do with that affection element of it and being able to be okay with the fact that you can be vulnerable, that you can, show your emotions and that's nothing's wrong with that. I wasn't raised so much like that from that perspective.
Me neither. Yeah, me neither. Definitely was not raised that way. The streets did not. Brooklyn didn't raise me that way. Barbados didn't raise me that way. But somehow I am the most affectionate person you're going to meet, especially when it comes to my kids and my wife. Manny, what about you? How was your relationship with your dad?
Yeah, likewise. I was also raised in a traditional family household with mom and dad, very active in my life. Definitely also not very super affectionate, but my dad was very, I like to equate him to almost like Yoda-like. He's very wise. And so it was always about teaching. Teachable moments, always, okay, this is what happened. This is why it happened. And his main goal really was really teaching me more about character traits, being honest, being kind, being hardworking. Those were really his main goals. And so, those have taken me a long way in life, and so I've always had a good relationship with my dad.
And for anyone who has like a really good takeaway from their parents, that for me, I kind of looked at it at the opposite. I want to do for my kids what wasn't done for me. You guys what was done for you that you want to make sure you do for your kids? Because I always look at it that your kids are going to be who they are because of you, but also in spite of you. Because, you know, we're always, as parents, we're going to make mistakes, right. And they're going to, you know, they're going to be formed through some of those mistakes, but they're also going to be formed through some of our positive traits. So if you had to pick one thing that you got from your dad that you definitely want to pass on to your children, what would that be?
And I could follow up with exactly what I had just said before. Really, the character traits, you know, just really teaching them good character traits, because those last with you forever. That's a lifetime worth of lesson. And so if you're hardworking, it really takes you all throughout the different phases of your life. If you're kind, you're honest, all those key character traits that really, you know, are beneficial both to you and to society in general.
Yeah, I'll jump in. And jump off of what Rick has said also, because what I got from my dad, hard work, hard work, hard work. You could set your watch by my dad, right? You knew where he was going to be at what time. You knew when that alarm was going to go off. You knew what he was going to be doing on a Saturday, on a Sunday, you know, in terms of those type of things. But also, you know, going back to his experience as an immigrant, coming here with nothing and making something out of nothing. I mean, he's left a legacy for me, my children, who are his grandchildren, and that's really what I want to impart to mine.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, it you know, for me, it stems around just the values element of it, right? And what does that look like, and how do you make sure you define that appropriately for yourself and for your family, right? Trusting in God. I mean, I think that's one of the main things, you know, I received from my parents in many ways from that perspective. And, you know, it's interesting. I struggle with this a lot. I'm in an interesting situation, and, you know, whether this is fortunate or disfortunate, however you want to look at it. But, you know, obviously how I was raised is very different from how my little girl's being raised. And she's got a lot more than I would ever even imagine, right? From that perspective. And I'm trying to figure out how to think about that, right? And making sure that she understands that, you know, this stuff doesn't come easy, right? And being able to instill that same kind of work ethic and perspective to her, because again, I didn't grow up like that, so I don't know how to think about that and manage that from that point. So that's something interesting, I'm thinking, just trying to, you know, kind of spin it a little bit of a different way.
That's the interesting part of the fathering part, right? Because they naturally benefit from the hard work that we've put in, right?
Yeah,
and we don't necessarily come from that, right? Yeah. So how do you now get that grit and that drive in them to put those two together?
Yes.
No question, man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that work ethic is definitely something that, you know, kids see, you know, whether you speak it verbally or not, kids kind of pick up on cues from their parents. So if they see their parents, like my mother was an entrepreneur, and I never really realized that's where I kind of got it from, because at the time I didn't know I was absorbing that from her. And kids kind of see that and kind of follow that if they have that image. If you had to impart any fatherly knowledge, I know some of you have newborns, but you learn really quickly. If you had to impart any fatherly knowledge on the next generation in terms of how they can learn from us or the previous generation, you know, what sort of advice would you give to the next generation of fathers? Like, how do we change this narrative? How do we redefine what Black fatherhood needs to look like? That's a good one, right? I stopped the gurus. I'm going to throw that to the veterans.
I jumped in a bit.
That one, because
there's no wrong answer. Right? There's no wrong answer. I just, you know, it's one of those things. You mentor, you know, you might mentor each one of you. I know you go out and mentor kids in the world, young people, other folks. So what kind of advice would you give them? Like, you know.
Yeah, and I say a couple of things. One is that, you know, what we just shared about our dads or you know, our dad experience and what we want to give to our children because of that, I think we cannot neglect the reality of our experience, right? So I talk about my dad. He wasn't a touchy-feely person, but I still gained from that experience, right? So there's some aspects of that I need to balance out so I don't overcompensate, right, and create a whole new dynamic. But, there's three things that come to mind to me when I think about the next generation that, came from my upbringing. God first, work hard, to achieve your goals or anything that you want. It's not going to be given to you. And, be good to people and leave places better than you found them. So, that's kind of what it wraps up with.
Yeah.
I love that. Absolutely. Rick?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a interesting one and a question, and I'm still working through it. I think day by day, right? And I think that's some of it is constantly try to mine for growth, right? I think not staying stagnant, and how do I make sure I can instill that in the next generation to some degree from that perspective. I think you constantly have to find how to keep refining yourself in many ways and find ways to allow yourself to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Because behind discomfort is growth.
Absolutely.
How do you think about that, and how do I instill that in my child, right? In so many ways to just make sure like they're experiencing any and everything, regardless of what it is, so that they can understand that you've got to keep trying things, you've got to keep looking at different cultures and really kind of, again, allowing yourself to expand your own kind of like, perimeter in many ways from that standpoint. So, and I think Ron hit it in a lot of ways. It goes back to some of those things we talked about, the values, God first and hard work that obviously is instilled. And how do you kind of keep that going in the legacy that you're building or that has been built and you want to just continue it on?
No, this is fantastic. It's fantastic guidance. It sounds like there's a lot of wisdom in there. You only get wisdom from experience. So, Manny, what about you?
And from mistakes.
And from mistakes, absolutely.
A lot of mistakes.
Yeah. The one thing I really think we need to really impart on the next generation and part of fatherhood is to teaching our kids about resilience. Our parents, grandparents, God only knows all the challenges they had to go through and the struggles and the obstacles, and they were continually resilient to get us to this point. I think it's really important to teach kids it's okay to fail. It's okay to try and fail, but you keep trying, you keep getting up, and you keep, the struggle and the fight going. I think it's really important because, as you said, most of our, parents or grandparents really started out with a lot less than what we had, which each successive generation has. And so I think making sure to keep that is really important.
Manny, I want to say something real quick because there's some research out there that part of the stresses for this generation is the fact that they have higher expectations, right?
Correct.
The world is different, but the generation before us, it was like, hey, I want to work, I want to pay my bills. Expectations around equity and being treated fairly and driving a certain car and living in a certain place were not there. So, if they didn't get close to that, it wasn't a big deal. But, right now, we kind of have that weird balance where we have all these opportunities for our young people. But, if they're not the top of the top, if they're not living in this place and the CEO of a company, sometimes they take that as a failure. So there's a different dynamic, which is interesting.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah, no, today's generation is very different than how we grew up. And I agree with everything you guys said. The only thing I would add to that is it's things that I kind of talk to my kids about. And it's really around, being present for the things that you're involved in. So whatever you choose to be involved in, just be there 100% for all of your commitments. If you're going to agree to do something, be there early. Like I'm notoriously early for everything, and
that's the Bajan in you.
It's the Bajan in me. You can set your clock by me. My team always knows if, for the most part, if we have a 9 o'clock meeting, they show up at 8:55. I'm already in the lobby looking at my watch. So I kind of impart that on my kids because that shows that you're serious about what you're doing and you're serious and respectful of other people's time as well. And, lastly, you guys nailed it with the resilience. Don't be afraid to fail. Like you're going to fail more times on your way to success. And though every step that you're taking, you're potentially, as long as you're failing forward, failing upward, it's all good. You only really fail when you stop trying, when you stop moving. Absolutely. So I kind of impart those kind of things because a lot of these younger folks that we talk to, they don't have the grit yet. And they need to develop that grit through trial and error and experimentation and failing. And we got to be there to support them to make sure it's okay not to be, like our generation had to be straight A students. Like, that's great, but you're not a colossal failure because you don't have straight A's or A's in a certain category. Your expertise may be somewhere else, other than, that one criteria. So, but I do want to take it back to the womb real quick, back to the beginning, because I was curious and I wanted to know, were you guys able to be present when your kids were born, like in the delivery room when it was all going down? And you could be vulnerable and say that you fainted if you fainted, just, because it is an experience. And I got 5, so it is an experience. So were you guys each present for each of your child's births? And what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I can kick that off. I was fortunate enough to be present. It was obviously a major priority for me on that front. So luckily, it wasn't anything that obviously would get in the way of that. It was, you'd have to ask my wife probably about how well I did, right? For that perspective. I think that's the person that has to be the judge. But it was emotional, man. It was emotional in so many ways. And it's the factor of the newborn, but it's also the fact of your wife, right? You're watching your wife going through this moment in so many ways, and how can you help to, ease the mind, the body, all the components that can help her through, obviously going through such a massive and, I can't even imagine moment. For that perspective, I don't think we're strong enough to do that. So clearly, they got up on us. So I mean, it's both of those things in many ways.
Shout out to the mamas.
Shout out to the mamas.
We could not do that, right? And when you see that, you get a chance to witness it. And again, I think it's something that's generational, right? Because I know I wanted to be there. I was there for the birth of both my children, and that was something that it wasn't a doubt in my mind. And it changed my life forever. To hold my firstborn is my daughter, to hold her in my arms, I knew, hey, it's not about me anymore. Even though I was married for years before that, it really became crystal clear that I now live for her, for my children. I also believe that even dads who are not in their children's lives, that, on their spirit, that they are changed forever. And if they're not apart, whether it's intentionally or non-intentionally, that it's something that you don't recover from. So, I'm glad I had the opportunity to be there.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And Manny, what about you?
Yeah, I smiled at this question because not only was I present, I did the delivery myself.
Whoa! Wow. Give an applause for that.
I know.
Yeah, I have a teammate who did that as well.
Yes, due to a series of just unfortunate events, the baby literally came as we're getting into the car to head to the hospital, and so he was delivered on the sidewalk in the streets of Brooklyn.
Wow!
It was, but it really the kudos goes, like you said, the mothers. I mean, his mother is unbelievable. She was tremendous during the whole process through the pregnancy. Obviously, I think fatherhood starts before the baby's born, right? It starts, like you said, in the womb. And so being a good partner during the pregnancy really helps with the outcome ultimately. And for us, we had a great pregnancy until the end. And so it was really fantastic holding him, in my hands, literally, as he's born.
Wow. Wow.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. Hats off
straight
to
out
you.
of Brooklyn.
Right, the streets of Brooklyn.
That's the stuff you see on TV. You're just like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
We ended up on NBC News.
Okay.
So when your son grows up, he has every right to say, I was born on these streets to somebody.
Right.
It's authentic. I did accidentally miss the birth of my oldest son, TJ. And I was there in the hospital, and they admitted his mother to the delivery room. And I went outside to call my boys to say it's going down. And within that period of time for me to walk to the payphone and come back,
it went down.
He was already he delivered within 7 minutes. So after that, I made sure I never missed another birth. And my wife would tell you I almost missed the birth of my daughter because she had so many Braxton Hicks, and it just running back and forth to the hospital all the time was a lot. So I almost didn't believe that it was happening this time.
It's funny. When my son was born, we just moved down to Atlanta, and I was finishing up business in New York. And my wife was 9 months pregnant, and she was like, "Look, if you don't get back down here by the time this boy is born, don't come." But I made it.
Just stay there.
So just to let everyone know, we'll be answering questions in the next less than 10 minutes. So if you have any questions for these amazing dads, please put them in the channel. Even if you just want to shout them out, definitely put it in the Facebook channel, and my team will make sure it makes its way to me, and we'll go ahead and get those questions answered for you. But just in winding down, we talked about the media stereotypes. We talked about the birth. We talked about your backgrounds with your parents. Is there any things that you want people to know? Like, literally, we're looking to shatter all of the stereotypes out there. Is there any things that any final thoughts you want to leave people with? Things that they might not ordinarily know or hear. We wanted to make sure this conversation was as real as possible, and we left it all on the field. So is there anything that you want to leave, and you guys can kind of go one by one and close this out?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's also just recognizing the element of the challenges and of being a Black parent, mother, father, right, from that perspective, and knowing what's happening around us in the environment, right, between, whether it's, class war that we're probably experiencing, racial wars that we're experiencing, whatever there may be. Obviously I have a 3-year-old little girl, right, a Black girl, and trying to figure out how to navigate, this world with her and being able to prepare for what it's going to be. It's something I struggle with every day, man. Like, and knowing, obviously there's a lot that's going on, right? Knowing the social unrest and the impacts of that, knowing the health, right? That issues that we have, right, within our culture, all of those things. So trying to kind of, take a moment to say to yourself, and you said it, Steve, I think in an interesting way, I kind of read philosophy sometimes, and there's a saying that a man doesn't have tomorrow or yesterday, you only got today, right? So it's just trying to be in the moment and be as present as you can, because all that I just said is massive, right? And you can felt so much pressure around how to obviously think about that, not just even for yourself, but obviously for your wife, for your kids, all of that, and how to obviously support and be there for your family from that perspective. But you got to take care of yourself as well. You can't take care of anybody else if you don't take care of yourself.
You got that right.
That is a fact.
You got to be in the right mind.
Self-care.
From that perspective. So that just becomes crucial in order to kind of think about it and balancing that through. So, find whatever that avenue is, whatever medium you use to be able to achieve that. You've got to find how to, be the best you can be, so that way you can be the best for somebody else, right? From that perspective.
Yeah, and what I tend to say is that, when men take their rightful place in the community gets better, right? And Strong families create strong communities. And I don't mean it from the machismo part of, oh, you're a man, so everything is set and you're in charge. But whatever that place is, whatever you need to be doing, right? So if it's volunteering and being a mentor to another young man, that's the rightful place. Whether it's making sure that your children have, a ride to school or whatever mom needs, even if you're not with mom, that's the rightful place. It's all about handling our responsibility to ensure that our children get the foundation that they need to succeed.
Absolutely. Manny, any final thoughts?
Yes, no, for me, it's really just understanding that you're just a link in a long chain. I mean, you're a father, you had a father, your father had a father, father's father had a father. It goes back a million years of fatherhood. And so this is your opportunity to really impart your knowledge to make the best version of that next generation, to continue a successful link in the family tree.
I love that. So I just want to, we're going to move into Q&A, but I just wanted to thank you all for this amazing panel and for putting your stories out there.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everyone for attending and making sure that you show up and show out for Black dads, because it is, being a mother is a thankless job, and women, do it beautifully and effortlessly and flawlessly all the time. But being a Black dad, we deal with that, but we also deal with all of the things that's in society kind of, chipping away at our mental health and our ability to be whole people when we show up for other people. And, this is a step towards us healing and kind of coming together and supporting each other. So I salute all of you Black dads out there. Keep doing what you're doing. And I do have a question from Jacob as we move into Q&A. So the first question is from Jacob. Have any of you found it difficult to balance work and family life? And if so, what change did you have to make to stay balanced?
I'll jump in. Yeah, it's very difficult. I can't imagine how a single parent does it. And of course, we talked about the power of single moms and all the magic that they make. What I learned over the years is that I have to not only have a schedule, but I also have to prioritize my family on that schedule, because coming from my dad, work was the priority, right? And they and everything else came afterwards. And in my style of parenting, that's different. So work is still significant. It's a close second, but I've made and had the privilege of making the choice of choosing my family first when they was in conflict.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, especially depending on obviously how ambitious you are, right, as an individual, and especially on your career path and what you want to achieve. I mean, for me, I'd say again, I go back to that moment, obviously, where my career kind of took a turn. I think really kind of put things in perspective for me, because I don't know, again, if I'd be the same today. Because to Ron's point, it was work in so many ways, and even today, it's still a juggle, right, and trying to figure that out. But I think I'm in a much better place today than I ever have been. But I'm not where I probably need to be, right? And being able to first recognize that is probably important. And trying to take the moments and times to try to figure out, what the priorities are, and putting that in perspective, So it's not an easy answer to that, by any means. I think you clearly know how important, right, being there and being present, like we talked about, is for your family. And then obviously as your career continues to progress and you see opportunities for you either bigger steps for it, right? The work and the time that needs to go in there. So you try to balance it to the best that you can.
Yeah, I would just chime in real quickly on the importance of scheduling. Just really create a schedule for when work hours, occur on a daily basis, and really stick to that, because what happens is obviously you tend to go outside the work hours in general, but really define, here are my work hours and here are my family hours, and really sticking to that schedule.
Yeah.
And I would throw something in there too, because like I mentioned, we are fortunate to be having the input on our schedule. But if a dad doesn't, then when you do have that free time, I think you got to just bump up and make sure that you're dedicating that time. Okay, so then this is the hour that I'm going to spend with my children and my family.
Yeah.
Make that moment count. No question.
Yeah. You got to set the boundaries in terms of when work starts and ends and when family time. Like work is going to be, for a lot of us, we're all hardworking people. So we're going to work as much as we can. But once we're in family mode, that has to be, you have to be wholly committed to that time. But sometimes we're not perfect. So follow up with Chris's question. Chris says, can you talk about your daddy failures and how you were able to bounce back?
Which one?
Put them in alphabetical order, Rick.
Yeah. So whichever is the one failure, and give us your quick synopsis of your most notable failure as a father, and how did you bounce back?
Yeah, I'd probably, for me, I think it's probably more with my wife and trying to make sure that I'm recognizing the mood, recognizing the needs, and addressing them appropriately, right? From that perspective, not that there's not father like my daughter opportunities by any means, but I think in just trying to mind for how do I be a really good husband as well. I mean, we talk about fatherhood, but those two things coincide, right? And how do you pull that together from that perspective? Because bringing a child into this world with someone else, puts pressure on that relationship as well, right? And taking that in perspective. So
I would have to agree with that on my part. My wife would kill me if I didn't agree with that, because especially in those first 6 months, I'm a notorious early bird. So I go to bed early and I wake up early. So I could not take that midnight shift of watching the baby, but I would wake up and 4 a.m, and I'll take the baby from there. But that burn, she would be burning from 9, when I used to fall asleep around 9:10, and I wake up at 3. And so I can definitely agree with being a good partner, a good support system, especially in those early months, is super important. And I do think I failed early on that part. I have since been forgiven, but that was a huge failure on my part. So I agree with you on that.
Luckily, I only have a 3-month-old, so I haven't had much opportunity for failure. I've used the wrong baby wipes once. I've learned.
But I will say, so I want to keep going on the questions, and I just want to go to, so Charles says, great conversations and dialogues, brothers. So thank you, Charles, for that feedback. Janet says, what's different in the way you're raising your children that's different than how you were raised? And I would throw that out to Ron. And the next question will go to someone else.
Sure. The big difference is, the relationship I have with my children. The relationship I have with my wife, I see myself as an equal partner. So, we trade responsibility. She's a great cook, but I joke around and I'll throw out there and cook sometimes, and she'll complain about the food, right? But I want my children also to see that I'm willing and able to jump in. Some of this, I guess really boils down to, and when you're a dad and you're there, and as we've talked about a lot tonight, you're present, you're willing to kind of do whatever it takes, and, just kind of fill those gaps there for, anything that potentially could happen. You're like a fix-it person, I think, as the dad challenge could go.
Yeah, and I think what you said is important too, because as Black men, we're not raised to show vulnerability. And sometimes as a dad, you have to show your kids how to not kind of bottle up all of that emotion, especially your boys. They can't bottle up all that emotion. Eventually they're gonna explode or it's going to have an impact on them, so that you have to be able to have those moments. You know, I used to cook with my daughter, and now she's wants to grow up to have a cooking show and all kind of things. So it definitely has a positive impact. Simone asked, does Juneteenth becoming a national holiday mean anything to you as a dad? Who wants to take that one?
I can jump in on that because my wedding anniversary is Juneteenth. So
yes.
We'll be celebrating 22 years. My wife is my college sweetheart. We met in college, but
congrats.
Yeah, it's significant. She actually knew more about Juneteenth than I did when we got married. So she told me why we picked the date. And I was like, okay, I get it. So yeah, it's very significant. It has changed my life because it led to me becoming a father.
Absolutely. And it's a big moment. You know, I think you can thank George Floyd. This is another reason to, put a positive spin on the tragedy of the George Floyd murder, is that it forced people to start thinking about things like Juneteenth and making that happen. And it's important that as fathers, we teach our kids about that legacy of why this is even important to talk about. It's still not enough. You know, there's plenty more work to do, but over the past year, I like seeing these steps. Gina says, has the pandemic and the current climate changed how you parent, and have any decisions regarding where to live, where you work, been affected? I'm going to throw that to Rick.
Yeah, it's been an interesting one for us in many ways. You know, we were up here in Canada when it happened, and the pandemic really started to obviously take its hold. And it was fortunate at first because we had just moved from Brooklyn, right? We didn't have a car in Brooklyn because we didn't need one. We got a little one, so up here we do. And we were just imagining ourselves being in Brooklyn without a car and having to deal with that. We're like, oh my God, thank goodness we're up here, right? And ideally, the first couple months with the real extreme shutdown, you got two parents trying to, watch a 2.5-year-old and work from home. All right. And that ain't fun at all. And, and that created its challenges, I'm sure, for anyone who's dealt with that in many ways. And we did our best. I mean, I actually, still look back at it, man, we came out of that and are really blessed. But, we've adjusted to some degree, I think, obviously. And for me, I think it's been less personally just because, I've been pretty much a flexible kind of, approach on how I work. I can do it from anywhere and kind of think about it from that standpoint. So I think as far as just fatherhood as a whole, the fact that, I'm there constantly. I'm able to take my daughter to school, not have to worry about, I might have to, not do that today because I got to get to work for the commute, things of that nature. So all of those things and pick her up and, obviously make dinners and all of that from that perspective. So I think it's given us a lot more family time, right? That we're obviously trying to take advantage of in as many ways as we can from that perspective. And I think, from a work perspective, again, it's been fluid for me. I mean, to say the least, I've been fortunate. I always look at it like, man, the fact that I actually get to work from home is a blessing in itself, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the pandemic and working from home has affected almost, everyone in some way. And I have a follow-up question to that from Josh Benson. Josh wants to know, and it's very similar to that question or a good follow-up, but how has the pandemic affected traditional gender roles of managing the family, if at all? And anyone can answer that, Rick, if you want, or if someone else wants to take that one.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think again, because you're obviously having more time, right, in the home. I think you have to start to try to figure out how do you align with your wife on being able to share that workload, right? I think have a good system right now, like who gets her ready, then who takes her to school, right? From that standpoint, who gets her a shower, like we've got a nice little thing going on and trading off. So I'm just hoping that it just stays this way. It's going well from that perspective. So I think it's just about, it's different for everybody. It's just about how do you have that alignment with your significant other, right? And what works best for you. But I think it takes communication and it takes commitment to say, hey, and I'm going to be accountable for the things that I say I'm going to do, because that's the part that when you're not, that creates the tension, right? Say, hey, like, this is how we're going to do it. And I'm going to make sure I hold up my end of that bargain.
Yeah, I would say, we have 3 kids that are in school right now. Two go to one school, 2 go to another school in a whole different town. One is in football, one is in cheer, and just coordinating those schedules and getting the kids back and forth and making sure, not one person is burnt out. And, one time I have a Zoom, one time my wife has a Zoom. So it does take some coordination. My wife is sitting at the table and I come in and I put her lunch in front of her because she doesn't stop to eat. So just being mindful that, of that burn and that mental health of the other person as well. You always have to be kind of plugged in as a team, because it takes a team effort, especially during this pandemic. I will go to, I'm going to go to Simone next. Because she has a really good question, and I'd love to hear your answers to this. Simone asked, what will you say to the deadbeat dad? And I want to put that in air quotes, the deadbeat dad who wants to re-enter his child's life and does not know where to begin. That is a great question, Simone.
I will say, you should allow him to, because any opportunity is welcomed. It's better than nothing. And so it's hard where to start. Just basically introduce yourself, maybe start small. But I do think ultimately having some engagement is better than no engagement, especially if it's positive engagement, right? There are some dads who may not be a good role model for their kids, but there are others, if you're a good role model and you want to really help, I think you should be allowed to. And you start small, maybe, a bite to eat, and then you work your way from there.
Kind of work him into that makes sense. Weekend here, a visit there, just to make sure that he's committed and, get him acclimated to the child's life again.
I think Manny was right on where he said, start slow if that's the challenge, but you definitely want, if that person wants to be and they're making an effort, you got to give them that chance, because for that young person, that child, for them to have that opportunity to connect and get that information, it may not be perfect, but that connection is important. They need to also make their own, get to their own understanding about that person. And then at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all fail and we all learn as well. So, it can be an opportunity for that particular father to win back. And they got to earn it back, right? They can't just show up and say, hey, I'm Superman, I'm here. But if they're willing to put in the work, they should have that opportunity.
I 100% agree. And I would just say, as long as the relationship between the mother and father is not toxic for the child, and you guys can come to some common ground and have some boundaries and some, a safe space where you can kind of parent together, and you don't have to always be together. You can say, hey, you take the kid this weekend, you drop them off to, this activity or whatever. I say, as long as it's not toxic, I would go for it. Because there's a lot, women can do it on their own. They've done it for years, but it's always better, in most cases better, when you have support from both parents. It's always better. So let's see. I would say I'm going to go to the next question. So in a follow-up to that, Jamil wants to know, what advice would you give to a young dad who grew up without a father? So he doesn't have the blueprint. He doesn't have the experience of growing up with a father. Like, what advice would you give to that young man?
I'm going to jump in here.
Father.
It's kind of like what we do in 100 Black Men. I was, steel sharpens steel. So you got to get around some dads, get around some other guys who have children, so you can start to learn and hear and develop your own, fathering style, right? Because it's a unique journey for all of us. But definitely get around some others who you can learn for, hear about those mistakes, because for none of us is perfect. I think Rick talked about it earlier. It's a sacrifice. It's going to be a crazy ride, but you got to be in it to win it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is a good question. As a guy who grew up without a dad, I did not grow up without male representation. Like, I didn't have a blueprint for a father, but I did have people around me, like other peers who had kids, who I saw sort of take custody of their children and be like the single dad. I did see that quite a bit in my circle. Shout out to Stark, shout out to Dre. But I will say that, having other positive role models around, like Ron said, is absolutely, that's absolutely essential, so that you can learn from them in terms of, some of their tactics, some of their pain. So you don't have to repeat that cycle if you can learn from another strong Black man. Or it doesn't necessarily have to be Black, but just another father figure.
But it helps to normalize it too, right?
Yeah.
Because you bounce something off that you're going through, and then that person who's been through it says, "Oh no, yeah, that happens all the time." I use the wrong baby wipe.
Exactly.
Calling Manny out, man. You calling Manny out?
No, I was confessing I've used the wrong baby wipe.
So, Marie, I got a ringer in the chat here. My wife Marie wants to ask, what can we do to shatter negative media representation of Black fathers, and how do we protect our kids from the evil of social media and tell a lie vision? Like, part of that to me, I see as, how do we stop this cycle from perpetuating the myths about Black men and Black fathers not making it down to our kids, so they grow up thinking the same stereotypes that we're growing up on now.
I mean, it's funny, man. I think there's a saying. Darkness can only be overcome by light, right? So the only way to do that is with the positives, right? We have to identify and get those, like I was saying earlier, those positive examples and stories out there for our people to see, for other cultures to see. And then we need more of those, right? And hopefully that becomes an impact and a trickle effect to be able to start to, see more of it, right? And try to have more individuals be able to show up and do what they need to do in terms of fatherhood. But there's plenty of it that's happening out there. It's just, we got to get that stuff out in some ways, and in showing it, and then be proactive about trying to look for it. I mean, a lot of times people, I think, tend to just focus on the negative and the drama, right? In many ways. So I think it's an interesting one. I think that's a major one in terms of impact to changing our cultural kind of trajectory.
And one way to do it this weekend, shameless plug, is to flood everyone's timeline with hashtag Black Dad Challenge. Show those images of you and your children, those great dads. Show those moments. Let's flood the timeline for this weekend with positive images of Black men. I do have one more question, and this is going to go to each one of you. It's really about legacy. William asks, how do you want your children to remember you? How do you want to be remembered by your children? I'm going to start with Ron and go to Rick and then Manny.
Of course you would throw me out there.
Of course.
It's interesting. I wore this shirt. My wife got this for me for Father's Day. I think it's Father's Day before last. But I think, this kind of sums it up. It says husband, daddy, hero. The other thing I would probably say is, a God-fearing man, right? And then this is all for me.
Husband, daddy, hero. Okay. Love it.
No, it's an interesting one and probably still working through it. I mean, I think, Ron, all those things are amazing, right? Husband, daddy, father, we're brothers, you know what I mean? We're sons, we're so many things in that component, but, I think before any of that, right, we're just human beings, right? From that standpoint, I just, like, if anything, just that he was just a good person. It's just this the simplest thing I could probably start with, right? From that perspective and in how to go about it. I'm sure there's so much more to it that I need to consider in terms of what that legacy looks like, and how to kind of fold that out. But, I think just being an actual, real, authentically true, human being, I think is kind of probably where it starts.
And Manny?
Yeah, I would say, I'd want to be remembered for my character traits, for my, the hardworking, honest, caring. I think oftentimes we all work on our resume, right? We have our resume, but one person told me at your death, no one reads your resume. It's your character traits that really matter at your funeral. And so the good character traits that you have, and hopefully you can impart onto your children.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I would say for me, I would just want my children to know that I put them first, that above all else, their entire lives, there's nothing that mattered to me more than them. So I would put anything on the line for them. And I want them to know that when they go out into the world, a lot of even now, a lot of people go out into the world and they don't feel that sense of love and importance, and they make decisions based on that emptiness they feel. And I make sure to pour into them as much love and positive reinforcement and guidance as I can. And I want them to know that they're first in my life. And I'm talking directly to them right now.
You working on that Father's Day gift?
I'm working on that Father's Day gift.
I see you.
I know.
Making it happen.
But no, I want to end it on that positive note. And just thank you guys again for, sharing your stories, sharing your insights, and helping to change the narrative around Black dads and letting them know that we are out here, we are doing the work, we are present. And I want to thank everyone for showing up and supporting the Black Dad Challenge. And, I want to thank my team for putting this together, and really, the leadership of my team for making sure that these conversations are front and center in the pocstock sort of brand. So I want to thank everybody again, and we're signing off shortly.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, man.
And enjoy Juneteenth, the first official holiday, first annual Juneteenth official holiday.
Thank you, and thanks to Pocstock. Keep up the fantastic work.
And happy Father's Day to everyone. Happy Father's Day to everyone. Thank you.